readers, I'm Amy and welcome to the 5th night of the 13 nights of Halloween. No, it is not actually night, but regardless, welcome to another night of the 13 nights of Halloween. I am doing 13 videos on various monsters and spooks and movies and making them bookish. For this video, I will be recommending books to the classic creatures of horror. So for this list, I have Godzilla, which I have only watched one Godzilla movie, so I had to consult Chris on this because he loves Godzilla. Frankenstein, I've seen a Frankenstein movie and I saw Bride of Frankenstein. I believe they were both the 50s versions or 40s? The early versions. Nosferatu, I didn't do Dracula because the original Dracula movie was Nosferatu in order to try and get away with adapting the Dracula book before they had permission to adapt the Dracula book. So we're going with Nosferatu for that one. The Blob, who I feel like the Blob isn't typically considered a classic horror movie creature, but I think the Blob is kind of a classic, and it's not like a bunch of the other creatures that have more definitive physical forms. And then Creature from the Black Lagoon is my last one. So let's get started with my creature feature recommendations. These books don't all feature creatures, but if you have creature feature horror books that you would recommend, please put them down below because that's not a genre that I've read a lot of and I would love to explore it more. Godzilla is considered the king of monsters. He is a prehistoric reptilian monster reawakened and empowered by nuclear radiation. So, king of monsters, nuclear radiation, so we got some science in there. Very science-based monster. So I have to recommend Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. You have the King of the Lizards, which is interesting since dinosaurs, as far as I know, aren't really lizards. They're more like birds. But the T-Rex is the King of the Lizards. You have John Hammond, who is this irresponsible, rich man-child who has decided to use blood from mosquitoes trapped in amber to create a theme park based around dinosaurs, which goes horribly for him. So have to recommend Jurassic Park for Godzilla. Godzilla would really relate to this book. I think he would find it really cathartic. Like, let's get revenge on these shitty people who have done these terrible things to us. And, like, yeah, these scientists messed with something that they shouldn't have messed with and should have left well alone. You can't get better than Jurassic Park for Godzilla. It's great. And then I also have Next by Michael Crichton. I believe I got this used, so I've never had the original paper cover for this. I might have to, create a cover for it. Next is one that I have not read since high school, so I'm super rusty on this, but I looked up the plot to kind of check my knowledge beforehand, and basically you have people whose cells and whose genetics have been mixed with other things. So we start off with a man who has leukemia. He's going through these treatments, and they find that his cells are being misused and he has to sue people. It's got kind of a Henrietta Lacks vibe to it. Later on, there is a chimpanzee who had human genes introduced, and so he can talk and has childlike behavior. So again, you've got science, you've got creatures, you've got messing with things that you shouldn't mess with, and Michael Crichton in general would just be a great author for Godzilla to fall in love with. Then we have Frankenstein. I only read half of the original book. It kind of felt like an extended chase scene. It wasn't the most interesting to me at the time. I've considered rereading or trying to read it again. Not sure if I ever will, but I've seen the original Frankenstein movie as well as Bride of Frankenstein. And for Frankenstein, I want to recommend Black Sheep. So I got this recently through my pre-order, finally came in, read it in 2 or 3 days. Pretty typical Rachel Harrison. You've got this woman empowerment story told through, this time it's a satanic cult, which is interesting. And I want to recommend this because there's this idea that the creator is the most important. So I feel like Rachel Harrison pretty clearly took some typical tropes or stereotypes of more like fundamentalist Christian religions and turned it into a satanic cult. And the creator is the most important. Like, nothing in the world is more important or should be more important to you than God. And in here, nothing in this world is more important than Satan. You do what Satan says, you do what Satan tells you, you follow the rules of Satan like this one person rules all. Not the healthiest situation to be in. And with Frankenstein, rather with Dr. Frankenstein, he is kind of Frankenstein's whole world, and Frankenstein's monster is trying to get away from that, or is angry about that. And I feel like this would kind of speak to Frankenstein's soul, like, no, my creator isn't the most important thing. I am also important. The creator gave me life and I should be able to live it. After Frankenstein, we have The Bride of Frankenstein. Now, I have a bone to pick from this movie. I watched it in college, and I remember thinking, oh, Bride of Frankenstein. It's gonna be about the Bride of Frankenstein. The bride doesn't show up until the last 2 minutes of the movie. She is only her own person for 120 seconds. It's kind of ridiculous. Earlier this year, I read Just Like Mother, and I really liked this. You have two girls who grew up in a cult and were taken away by the police to try and rebuild their lives afterwards. And it's a lot of discussion of being child-free and whether women should be allowed to be child-free and women should want to be mothers. Very much a book that is up my alley, that is a topic I really enjoy reading about, and I think I would recommend Just Like Mother to The Bride of Frankenstein, where there's this idea of what you're supposed to be. The Bride of Frankenstein was created to be a bride for this person. That's the whole reason that she exists. And I want to be like, no, Bride of Frankenstein, or Bride of Frankenstein's monster, you don't have to be a wife. You don't have to be the bride of Frankenstein. You can be your own monster. You can be your own person. You can make your own choices in life. I think she could use a little bit of a pick-me-up, a little bit of a women empowerment story. Not that this is really empowering, because it's very culty and very, we're going to make our decisions for you. But I think she would really appreciate the conversation in this book. Also, I don't know what's up with my voice today. It's just kind of doing its own thing. Now for Nosferatu. I love Dracula books. I love vampire books. Love it. I have seen Nosferatu. I feel like it was pretty true to the first half of the book. But again, Dracula, they didn't actually have permission to turn Dracula into a film. They turned it into Nosferatu instead, because Stoker's wife is like, no, I don't want this to be made into a movie. I'm still looking into that more. I think it would be interesting to find out more about Stoker's wife. So far, what I know is that she dated, I believe it was Oscar Wilde for a couple of years before she dated Stoker, so that was very interesting to learn. Anyways, Nosferatu, we got vampires, we got transformation, we got chasing down our victims, so I have 2 recommendations for this. First, My Best Friend's Exorcism. So far, I do think it's Grady Hendrix's best book by far. We got a great friendship in here, but also you have these 2 girls, they're best friends, and one of them is, she's like trapped in a house, and whenever she gets out, she's changed, she's different. She was lost for a bit, she comes back, and something is not right, and we're slowly seeing the demon, or what our main character thinks is a demon, is slowly taking over her and changing her and turning her into something that she wasn't before. She's fundamentally being changed as a person. And I feel like that really speaks to the vampire genre, which is a lot not only about sucking blood and eroticism and sexualizing women, but it's also about that transformation and that change and what happens when you change and how relationships are affected. And then, I haven't read this in a while, but I loved this when I read it a couple of years ago. That is Fierce Kingdom. I haven't talked about this book in a little while. You have a mother and her child who are going through the zoo, and then they find out that there is a shooter at the entrance, and kind of an extended chase scene of a book. And it reminds me a lot of the second half, more towards the end, of Dracula, where they're trying to chase him down. They're trying to find all of these houses that he's stored the earth of his home in, and they're putting holy wafers on it so he can't hide there anymore, and they're chasing him over to Transylvania. Or you have Dracula, who is kind of chasing down this group of people. These books, I guess, aren't so much for Dracula himself as like aspects of the vampire genre, but regardless, I think Nosferatu should read these two books and would enjoy them, would have a good time. Then we have The Blob, and again, for The Blob, I wanted to do more of the idea behind the creature rather than necessarily the creature itself. Also, the Blob isn't exactly a personality. It's more just like this giant pink thing, and it grows larger as it envelops people, and it grows more violently pink. And so I wanted to explore some books where something kind of takes over your whole life, envelops your entire life, becomes your whole life. So My Dark Vanessa, I believe I read this whenever it was first published, so it's been a couple of years, but you have this girl who was taken advantage of by her teacher sexually, and then grows up, grows older, the teacher moves on, and in this book, it's very much kind of sort of Stockholm Syndrome-y, where she's going to therapy and the therapist is like, this is really awful, I'm sorry this happened to you. Vanessa, however, still really looks fondly on that teacher and misses that time in her life and doesn't see it as a bad thing. And it just goes to show how this single event in your life can take over all aspects of your life. Also in this book, the teacher's inappropriate interactions with students finally come to light, and she's seeing all this news media about that, and she really struggles with that. She really doesn't believe it. She ignores the problem, and it just grows bigger because it wasn't properly addressed from the start. So, very Blob-ish. And The First Day of Spring. This was recommended to me last year? Not to me. It was recommended last year, I believe it was, by Victoria. From what Victoria read, I thought it sounded fascinating. I found a copy, I read it, I loved it. A little girl, she's 8 years old, a little girl kills a boy. And we go back and forth between her adult life and her life as a child. And as an adult, she's in kind of this witness protection sort of program. She's living under another identity and trying to get through life in spite of this thing that happened when she was a child, when she killed another child. Again, you have this one heinous act that takes over everything and becomes this enormous problem. And I really loved this book. It's not just kids killing kids. Like, that's something that I really struggle with. Can't do it in movies, can't really do it in books. It's, why did she kill this boy? Why did this 8-year-old murder someone else? And the work that Nancy Tucker puts into exploring this character with us and helping us discover what was her life like as a child. How did this action come to pass? It was just so well done. Lastly, we have The Creature from the Black Lagoon. I have not watched this monster movie, but I did read Lady from the Black Lagoon by Mallory O'Meara. I was thinking Congo. In this book, we have these people who are going after diamonds in the Congo, and they're suddenly attacked by these creatures that they aren't able to identify in that moment. And then back at the lab, we have this woman with her gorilla. She's very, what's the name of that scientist that worked with gorillas? Diane Fossey or Jane Goodall. It's very much a character pulled from those two people who really gave their whole lives to studying gorillas. And she has a gorilla that she works with who knows sign language. She's teaching her sign language, kind of teaching her how to communicate. And if I remember correctly, they bring this gorilla who knows sign over to the Congo because turns out these creatures that have been attacking them are these giant, I believe they're genetically modified or some just kind of strange, really large, extra aggressive gorilla, and they're trying to find ways to communicate with them. And I think that The Creature from the Black Lagoon would really identify with that, would really love that conversation and relate to it. I'm this mysterious creature that no one knew about, and now everyone's terrified of me, and maybe I have my own agenda and my own thoughts and my own reasons for doing things. Why don't people just communicate with me to find it out? So I think that the Congo would really speak to The Creature from the Black Lagoon. So that is going to be it for this stack of recommendations. Also, I don't know what my hair is doing this morning. Here's my awesome stack. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know down below. Please leave comments if you've made it to this point in the video and like the video, interact with it. Let me know that you've seen it. But let me know what you would recommend to these different monster movie creatures. What kind of books do you think they would into? What kind of genres do you think they would enjoy? Let me know down below. So please subscribe, be my friend on social media, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye, friends.